Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today, well, there's not a whole lot going on in Vikings territory right now. So we are into that situation where nobody's playing next weekend because it's the Pro Bowl. And of course, they canceled that due to COVID. And no one cares either way. And on top of that, then the Chiefs and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won't play for 2 weeks. So we're just kind of low on content right now. So this is going to be an interesting week of manufactured content from us. Fortunately, we do have a couple coaching moves or movements, I suppose, that we can have a quick discussion on. But we're going to spend the majority of the show kind of stacking up the Vikings against the Green Bay Packers. And the timing on that is supposed to make sense. If you were watching this past weekend, the Green Bay Packers were officially eliminated by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both Drew and myself had Green Bay favored in that game. Ultimately, that was not the outcome. And some comments from Aaron Rodgers, some comments from Matt LaFleur, and so forth have instilled a lot of controversial, polarizing opinions. And we're going to jump in on that. So that's the game plan for today. Probably going to be a short one, but we'll see what happens. We always say that, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about these coaching moves first. We have official confirmation first and foremost that Gary Kubiak is retiring. He is done for what I think it's the second or the third time now, filing the paperwork to the NFL. He will not return as the Vikings offensive coordinator. Now, we've talked about what this kind of means for this team, what they need to look for, or I suppose what we think they need to look for. Some changes have happened since we had that discussion. Anthony Lynn, no longer a potential candidate. My personal favorite, if you remember, he's going to Detroit instead. Other movement around the league, just in general, the Vikings are going to kind of have last pick of the draw as a result of what's been happening with these teams that have already been eliminated from the postseason. And we're already making these moves while the Vikings were waiting on Kubiak's announcement. So where do they stand in that regard? How do you feel? Is there anyone that really sticks out to you at this point where you're like, I would love to see the Vikings go out and get Joe Brady, for example?
At this point, the fact that there hasn't been, a lot of reports, rumors of them interviewing people, things like that, I just find it very likely that they're going to go to Kubiak.
I do
too. They've got a track record of going to the in-house guy, and when they haven't gone to the in-house option, such as John DeFilippo, it's kind of gone south. So there's just a lot of evidence to me to believe that they're going to go to Clint Kubiak here. And whether I think there's a discussion we had, and we've had that a little bit already about the pros and cons of that. But I just, given where things are right now, and the fact that Zimmer seems very high on how the offense played last year, and he should be, and he's going to want to keep that continuing as much as possible. So I think he's going to stick with Clint Kubiak here.
Absolutely. There's generally, when a coach leaves your staff in some way, shape, or form, you either try to do one of two things: continue on with what was working, maintain some consistency, or you try to go in a different direction because you sucked and you need to figure out a new path to success. The Vikings are in a position where I think most of us would agree that consistency on offense would be nice. They finished very high against, relative to the rest of the league in a number of statistical categories. It was more turnovers and kind of untimely play that hurt the team, as opposed to, consistent offensive drives leading to points, whether that was touchdowns or field goals. They were getting into that area with consistency for 16 games. That was not the problem this season. So that evidence lends to what you're saying. Clint Kubiak kind of makes sense. He's, of course, the son of Gary Kubiak, who can pick the mind better than the son. He probably is the closest thing there is to what the Vikings did last year in terms of philosophy, style of play, general opinion, school of thought.
And now we should clarify, we don't know what, maybe Clint does have a different philosophy than Gary. There are things to consider there,
right.
But and the thing, I'm sure the Vikings have understood that, and they're talking with him now about that. But there's just, it might not be a picture perfect replica, if you will, but it's probably the closest thing, as you said, that the Vikings are going to get to Gary, if that's what they were trying to do, is kind of keep things moving as they did in 2020.
So then, do you agree with the notion that the Vikings should try to trend in the same direction as opposed to going outside higher and trying to bring in a new school of thought or some, innovation?
Yes and no. I think I guess I just point to the overall the larger picture thing of having an offensive head coach is where the Vikings should go.
Right.
If the Vikings are going to stick with Zimmer, which it appears that they will, right? And I don't see any reason that will change. Then I will, and I would say yes, stick with the Kubiak family, I guess, and go with Clint here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think nepotism is the right move in this situation for all of us. I don't think outside hire makes sense for the Vikings in this situation. You don't need to. You want to try to maintain as much consistency at that position as you can. In terms of who's calling the plays. Period. Right. The Vikings have an opportunity to do something like that, which I would say this is the best opportunity to maintain consistency that they have had since Kirk Cousins arrived.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like I'm always going to be for kind of taking that risk, right? It's just I don't know, like, is that risk worth taking at offensive coordinator, or
That's what. Okay, that's an
does it
interesting
apply
point
to
here.
quarterback? Because quarterback's where it's always talked about. Like, do you want the risk to take at quarterback? What the Chiefs did with Mahomes, they had Alex Smith, who was rock solid and a really good starting quarterback for them, but they took the risk on Mahomes and it paid off. And then there's kind of the discussions of the Sean McVays and the Cliff Kingsburys and the guys that are these offensive gurus that we kind of didn't have a ton of experience, weren't really, they were young guys, but they have, I would say, worked, at least those two guys have worked out. And so do the Vikings gamble, so to speak, and maybe Clint Kubiak is that gamble. There's a discussion to be had there too.
That's I want to kind of draw attention to the point that the timing here matters as well, right? The Vikings are coming off of a down season, a season in which has, in my personal opinion, and I assume probably a lot of yours as well, has put Mike Zimmer's butt on the hot seat for next season. If the Vikings go 6-10 or even 7-9 again, he's going to be gone. So this is a situation now where, in general, I would say maintaining consistency is kind of the, politically correct move. It's not going to get anyone fired. It's not going to get anyone in trouble. It makes sense to try to maintain what you did last season. But if you're Mike Zimmer and your ass is on the line, and you also know that your defense, it can improve, and it will improve significantly, I'm sure, but it was really bad last year. You're going to need to be carried by your offense again. Is it better to try to go with the young guy who has never done this before and just has the family name, or try and go out and find someone else that can do something special? The timing matters here. Mike Zimmer, this is Mike Zimmer's call, or I guess Rick Spielman's call, but through Mike Zimmer, this is their call.
Which both of them are kind of in the same scenario. I mean, they're tied. They're tied. So
if they lose again next season, they're gone. Both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's you're right about that. But I mean, again, with even all that said, I still expect that they go to Clint. Seriously, I mean,
I do too. It's just so anticlimactic. It's just like
it is,
raise hell over here about it, but I think we know what the Vikings.
I mean, what I don't. Maybe I'm just missing out, but like I'm on Twitter a little too much in my life, and I haven't seen any rumors or reports or anything of interviews or anything like that.
Yeah, neither have I. So, all right, let's move away from that direction here into the other coaching move that was just made or just announced, I suppose, a couple minutes before we started recording this show. And that is the departure of defensive backs coach Durante Jones. Now, many of you, I assume, probably not too familiar with this name, and that's because you're familiar with Jerry Gray, who, of course, departed 2 years ago, and he was replaced by Durante Jones, who took over and brought this beauty of a defensive back season to the Minnesota Vikings. This is an interesting situation. The Vikings did not fire him, which, given the defensive back play, a little bit up and down, but there was also some nice, notable movement from guys like Cameron Dantzler. You saw development from, other players across the board, and you saw some guys get the most out of who they are as a player in the NFL. So there is good and bad here for Durante Jones. But ultimately, the numbers say he sucked last season. But he's going to LSU. He's going to be the new defensive coordinator for Ed Orgeron. That's a big time move. I don't think Ed Orgeron would think the guy sucks that he's bringing to, be in that position for him. Where are you at with this move? Do you care? Does this matter?
I don't want to say I don't care because that just seems like it's kind of arrogant, but like, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a huge emotional attachment to Durante Jones. I don't have a huge attachment to the way things went in the secondary last year. So like, this is whatever. Like, I mean, I'm sure Durante Jones is great. We just never. I don't think he was given the chance really here to build something the way a defensive backs coach maybe does, or at least the way Jerry Gray was able to. So there's a lot of things to consider there, and I just good for him for getting this position that he's expected to. I mean, it's not official yet, should clarify, but expected to take this job, which is it's kudos to really I think the Vikings as a whole for sort of it seems like a lot of teams and coaches and organizations look to the Vikings now for hires. I mean, it happens a lot. Offensive coordinators become head coaches, assistant GMs become GMs with Peyton. Now you got a defensive backs coach becoming a D coordinator at a Power Five powerhouse in the college football world. So kudos to him.
Sometimes it's more about knowing the philosophy, and having kind of the philosophy you want, as opposed to a track record of solid execution.
Mm-hmm.
I think Cliff Kingsbury is probably the best possible example of this. The philosophies that Cliff Kingsbury was employing at the collegiate level were awesome. Super innovative, crazy downfield attacking, vertical spreads. Makes the usage of the entire field from sideline, vertical, horizontal, whatever. That was all very cool. It didn't translate to wins at the collegiate level. And honestly, it hasn't translated to wins at the professional level yet either. There's reason to believe it might, but regardless, you see my point here. They hired him because they thought his philosophy might work.
It was that gamble.
Execution.
I mean, that's that gamble that teams are trying to take nowadays to find the next McVay, if you will. And I mean, this is sort of off topic, but like it's, my buddies were talking about this today actually in the group chat about Kingsbury, how much of a risk that was, and the fact that he had Pat Mahomes in college, and was what I think we're a 500 team at Texas Tech.
Mahomes also wasn't very good.
Well, or maybe he was, and it was just. I mean, I didn't watch enough of him to know, to be honest.
Right.
But there's just. I mean, it doesn't look good on Kingsbury's record, is I guess what I'm saying. That he had Mahomes in college and had a couple of great weapons there, like DeAndre Washington, and he had. I believe was a Kiki Cutie, who's also in the NFL now playing for the Texans. Like he had options there, and they were a very average Big 12 football team. But anyway, that's very off topic in terms of the Vikings. So,
but I mean, the point stands here that Durante Jones comes to Minnesota. He spends 1 year in Minnesota after 4 years coaching with different organizations, primarily Cincinnati and Miami. So he brings in philosophies from all these different guys. And all of a sudden you add Zimmer into what he's had in the mix previously. Some of this stuff matters. Brian Flores, I believe, would be in that group as well. There's a lot of different schools of thought coming into a young developing mind. I would consider Durante Jones to be young relative to coaches and in professional and collegiate football. So this is definitely a power move by him, going from a fading.
Good for him. That's
and he's going to LSU. I mean, this is going to give him every opportunity to shine. If he shines at that level, I mean, we could be talking about this guy coming.
You're going to get the opportunity to play Alabama, right? If you're able to contain out of Alabama, that's a huge step. So, I mean, watching LSU against them last couple of years, been tough against Alabama offense, but.
So the obvious subsequent question here is then how do the Vikings replace this guy now? Now this is a smaller role here. This is an assistant coaching position. You don't even necessarily need to, fill this position. Keeping in mind, of course, that there are titles across every NFL team that are, interchangeable to a degree, and some teams choose to employ some positions, some don't. The Vikings have historically employed a defensive backs coach, of course, and Jerry Gray being the most consistent one over at least my lifetime as a fan, I suppose. So there's an expectation that position will be filled. Is there anyone internally that you were like, that you're just like, I would love to see this guy get another opportunity? Is there anyone that sticks out that you've heard anything about?
Not really. And that's just me not digging deep enough. I mean, I just with the defensive backs coach, like it's just when Mike Zimmer's the head coach, right? And his calling card is the development of defensive backs. Like it's just one of those positions that I personally and admittedly just kind of gloss over, just because of the way Zimmer, his reputation has built itself as this guy that can develop D backs. Like what. Not saying Durante Jones didn't do anything or doesn't deserve this promotion, anything like that. It's a position that, frankly, I kind of gloss over because of what Zimmer is supposed to be doing.
Right. And that's an important piece here, too, that whoever is jumping into this role is going to have to, completely immerse themselves in what Zimmer does, right? And Zimmer is old school. Some of it's really fun and innovative. I mean, I don't think we see the double A gap as much as we used to, for what it's worth. And some of those looks are a little bit different than, they were 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But you have to, whoever is coming in here is going to need to be built into what Mike Zimmer's approach is, because it's at least not leaving for another season, right? He's not going to be. I don't think the Vikings are the type of team that fires someone mid-season. So whatever happens here, you're going to get a year under this guy. I think the most, you know, I think the solution to this issue is just to promote Roy Anderson. He's your assistant defensive backs coach. For those of you who are not aware, younger guy. I don't know much about him other than his name, and I can read you his bio if you want, but I'm not going to because you can Google that yourself. He's an interesting candidate here. I think it keeps continuity at a position where you did see some good growth, and I think you have to be happy with some of the technical improvements of guys like Dantzler, specifically, who started as a grabber and kind of started gravitating towards that development that Xavier Rhodes had a couple of years back, where instead of grabbing, all of a sudden now you're able to get off coverage and avoid that call in the future. So there's some development there. There's some reason to believe that there's going to be consistency here. I think it'll be an internal hire, and really, I don't think it affects the immediate outcome of the Vikings either. So there's that. That's where we stand in terms of the coaching staff as of this recording. And I'm sure we will have further developments in this situation the next time we speak.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, let's discuss what's going on in the NFL postseason and kind of how that relates to your Minnesota Vikings. Now, the biggest stories, of course, coming out of this past weekend being the Chiefs advancing to the Super Bowl over the Buffalo Bills, and more importantly for our purposes, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers overwhelming the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers, sending them home quickly and quietly and advancing to the Super Bowl for Tom Brady's 10th appearance. Now, I would love to talk about Tom Brady. There's no reason to do so here. I think you guys are going to get enough of that. So let's talk about the losing team, which I think you guys are probably more interested in. And what this means and where your Vikings stack up moving forward. The Packers just had a great year. They also had a year that came short of expectations, and they also had conversations immediately after this game that suggest that there will be significant changes in the not so distant future. Whether that's Rodgers himself or other positions, this team may look very differently. So with the Packers losing in the NFC Championship, how good or bad do you feel about your Vikings to compete against them relative to the choices that they may or may not make?
Yeah, so this is fun because, I mean, the Vikings beat the Packers at Lambeau this year, which is the best part about this. By the way, 2 quarterbacks beat Rodgers at Lambeau this year, Tom Brady and Kirk Cousins. Just keep that in mind. But so the fun part about all of this, right? And the fun part about last offseason was making fun of the Packers draft, right? And, I'm not saying that the Packers draft class cost them this game, because that's just not true. I mean, the fact that, there's a bunch of different things you talk about, coaching decisions, kicking field goals, not taking advantage of Brady interceptions, things like that are ultimately what matter. But you look back at how they drafted and the way they proceeded in the free agency period. And for years, right, the knock against Green Bay is that they weren't doing enough to help Aaron Rodgers. You have the drop on the 2-point conversion for Equinemius St. Brown. You have drop problems all year long from Marquise Valdez-Scantling. Now, he did get much improved down the stretch of the season, but how much would it have helped to have a star young receiver in that offense all year long, a la Justin Jefferson? Now, Packers would have had to be aggressive to get him, obviously, but Justin Jefferson or you take a chance on like a Brandon Ayuk or somebody like that.
T. Higgins, maybe.
T. Higgins, nice. Right? That could have been a huge change in this offense. And so I'm not going to say that that's the reason they lost, but now I looked back at this last offseason because the Vikings lost a bunch of talent. The Bears and Lions didn't do a whole lot. The Packers missed a real opportunity, I think, in free agency and in the draft to solidify their supremacy in the division for the long haul. To keep Rodgers around, keep him happy enough to be in Green Bay, which I think by default would keep them supreme in the division. But also, even if Rodgers leaves, you had the chance for roster development moving into the future. And I don't think they did that very well because you drafted a QB which I'm all for drafting a QB when, drafting QBs at the most important position, good thing to do. Then you go after a running back who, not the best receiving guy, kind of an old school back, and A.J. Dillon, Then I think their third pick was like an H-back tight end guy who didn't contribute very much at all. He might have been injured, but Josiah Dikwara, I think was his name. So they're not, in terms of positional value, they didn't do a whole lot. And so you wonder if they maybe missed that opportunity, because I think they're maybe letting the rest of the division stick around, or at least have that chance to kind of keep up in the next coming years. And then we can also talk about the fact that Rodgers really hinted at some things with his post-game comments.
So the Packers draft, you're right. That in itself, those 3-4 players that in theory may or may not have contributed had they done a better job, did not influence the outcome of this game, significantly. Was there a couple plays where you probably would rather have, Brandon Ayuk in there? Probably, yeah. But did it change the outcome? No. The Packers shot themselves in the foot. It was LaFleur's decision to not go for it on fourth and even give himself the opportunity.
Inexplicable.
Yeah, completely inexplicable. They did this to themselves, and really, I don't like what Aaron Rodgers said about how he said, something in so many words that it wasn't his call. I don't think you say that out loud. I think it's something you let us all think it, because we know it. But he's right. It wasn't his call, and the call that was made sucked. Now, a lot of the calls that have been made on his behalf lately have really sucked, and that's really what matters here. It's not the outcome of this game that matters. I think if the Packers had found a way to win and gone to the Super Bowl, we'd be having this same discussion if the Super Bowl ended in defeat for the Packers. And honestly, we may have this discussion anyways, even if the Packers had won. There's adversity there caused by decision-making that Aaron Rodgers does not like. It's as simple as that. It really is. And, you go 3 for 3, you go 0 for 3 in your first 3 picks in terms of what Aaron Rodgers would like. And then you make this call, which is basically saying, I'm going to trust my defense here to get the ball back instead of my Hall of Fame quarterback. Yeah, against Tom Brady. Instead of my Hall of Fame quarterback to go, what was it, 5 yards?
I mean, it was less than 10. It was like 7 yards, I think.
And we had already seen on the previous play that, had Aaron Rodgers made the right decision, he could have just ran it himself. They were that close that he could have just ran it himself. It's another decision where it's just like, dude, are you trying to piss off maybe the best quarterback in the game? Are you trying to? Because I think you are. And so this is what I really think happened here. I think Matt LaFleur is trying to put his stamp on the roster like just about every coach ever does. The difference here is that you try to put your stamp on the roster when something's not working. When Mike Zimmer comes in and the defense sucks, that's when you change everything. You're like, I'm going to bring my philosophy in here. We're going to fix everything about this defense. This cover 2 that Leslie Frazier was running, not working anymore. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to change everything, and we're going to get the personnel to do so. It worked for the Vikings. The Packers were already good. They already had their quarterback of the future. His name is Aaron Rodgers. He's the he's the past, present, and future for this team. It's so obvious. But Matt LaFleur was like, I'm going to try to change this team and put it in my direction. I'm going to send this team, the way that I want it to go instead of building on the blocks that they had.
Credit to Rodgers. He did buy in. I mean, it took him, I think, there's a bunch of, comments, the response to Rodgers maybe not as explosive of a year last year was that, it took him a year to get used to the system that LaFleur installed. 2020 was awesome, right? So I would say he bought in, even though he's made it, I think, clear that he hasn't loved all the decision making. I think, obviously the one that comes to mind is Jordan Love, what he was kind of going on, Pat McAfee show, or was it Kyle Brandt on NFL Good Morning America, or Good Morning Football, whatever it's called, and he said along the lines of, well, I didn't love it, but my job is to lead this team, and that means developing the next quarterback, blah blah blah. So he's made it clear he doesn't love the decision making, but he bought in because he wants to win, and he was, again, a couple games short of a Super Bowl title again. But like, ultimately, Packers did not improve them last year. 13-3, lost the NFC Championship twice in a row. They ultimately did not improve. And you look back at the opportunities missed. Could they have been more aggressive in free agency?
Yes.
Could they have been more decisive, made better decisions in the draft in terms of the position of value? I would say yes. And now I'm not here to, where I want to relate this to the Vikings is because for as bad as the Packers may have messed this up, we should also acknowledge that the Vikings were in a position that they had to rely on rookies this year to be successful. Whereas the Packers were already 13-3, NFC champion, well, in the NFC championship game. if they had gotten contributions from rookies that were nearly what the Vikings got this year in terms of Jefferson, Gladney, and Dantzler, Packers are probably winning that game at Tampa. I'd say if Green Bay had a Justin Jefferson out there next to Devontae Adams, I think they would.
They had Brandon Ayuk and Antoine Winfield. Put those two guys, which are both feasible picks. How much of a difference does it make? We don't know.
I think
they
quantify
it, but it's
I think
different.
they win. I think they win. There's a couple times in the red zone where Rodgers was the 2-point conversion for one that St. Brown dropped right into his hands. I mean, come on, especially as somebody who teased the Packers to 3.5 plus 3.5 yesterday. That did upset me. But there's serious question marks that you can answer with that. So when at the flip side, the Vikings relied so heavily on rookies because they had to, because of how bad the roster was prior to the season. And of course, injuries played into that as well. So these teams are both, how do I put this? The Vikings are in a really bad spot as well. It's just a very different bad spot because of where the Packers are. Packers roster is great. They have the Hall of Fame quarterback, and they missed their chance. They missed their chance to solidify themselves up there. The Vikings are kind of working their way from the bottom because they have to, because of decisions they made prior, including the Diggs trade, you're letting go some key players, et cetera, et cetera.
So I want to make one more point on the Packers, and we can go back to where the Vikings stand, heading into this season with respect to the Packers. Ted Thompson, of course, he's unfortunately passed away, but that's neither here nor there about my point. But one of the biggest knocks on him, in his career with the Packers specifically, was the fact that he just didn't acknowledge the existence of free agency, right? He very rarely even made an attempt. And if it was an attempt, he was maybe spending $3 million or something.
Yeah, it was like Jimmy Graham or something like that.
It was very minuscule and never, taking advantage of the opportunity that is there. Now, is there always an opportunity there? Are there teams that overdo it all the time? I mean, we regularly see teams, overspend in free agency and then later suck. Yeah, there's arguments for both sides, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, this is a guy who got fired for many reasons, because he wasn't trying to take a greater advantage of the resources given to him. Matt LaFleur is doing something similar, but it's more aggravating. He's not only disregarding the resources that he has available to him. Aaron Rodgers. It's not just him. It's Aaron Jones too. I mean, you go get A.J. Dillon when you've got Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones that are already working.
Well, I think they're under the impression that Jones is gone. You don't draft A.J. Dillon if you understand. Like, their plan.
Why is he gone? He's gone because of them.
Well, I think so. This is actually something I would agree with the Packers on. They don't want to pay the big running back contract because Jones is gonna want that. He's gonna get that somewhere else. And I actually agree with the Packers there. You stick with Jamal Williams and A.J. Dillon as a 1-2 punch. I like that better personally. But at the same time, maybe Aaron Rodgers wants Aaron Jones around, So it's one of those things where you got a guy like Aaron Rodgers around, right? Like, you're seeing this with the Texans too right now, where you got a guy who is one of the top 5 most valuable players in the league. Like, very easily might be number 1. I think for sure Mahomes would maybe take the cake there, but one of the most valuable players in the NFL, one of the most valuable athletes in the world, Aaron Rodgers. He's going to have, or should have, a say in the decisions that you make about the franchise's direction. The Texans are kind of missing out on that now with Watson. I saw something to say about Stafford and the Lions, where he wants out now because of the offensive coordinator situation. So you got to get these guys involved. These guys are carrying the franchise on their back, the quarterback position. If they're a stud quarterback, that they carry the franchise on their back. And so if you trust them and if they're elite players, you should be trying to help them as much as you can. It seems like LaFleur is kind of, I wouldn't say he's going out of his way to not do it, but he's not taking advantage of the resource that is Aaron Rodgers right there.
And that is, in its simplest form, is the reason why everyone's pissed. It's because he's literally disregarding the opinion of people's opinions who we want. If you're a Packers fan, we want Aaron Rodgers' opinion to be accounted for. We think that his not only that it's an important opinion,
right,
but it's an aggressive one too. It's going to be helpful. It's going to give you more of an opportunity to have all the facts.
It starts off with the message that you send by trading up to draft a quarterback.
That's
how
it
starts.
It's just the message. It's not about the result at all. They could have, if they had drafted, I don't know. I don't care. Pick who it is. Drafted Justin Herbert, and we knew somehow that we're clairvoyant and we know that Justin Herbert is going to be as good as he is as a rookie playing in San Diego, or Los Angeles. I'm just butchering this. Whatever. So it wouldn't matter that you got a good quarterback, and maybe Jordan Love is good. It wouldn't matter. It's literally the decision that they made. That's it. It's just a bunch of decisions that are conflicting with the core of your team. And to me, that alienates everyone on the roster, because if Aaron Rodgers is upset, he's the most passive aggressive asshole in the world. It's gonna annoy everyone. It's just he's I don't even think he knows he's doing it, to be honest with you. But
the comments you mentioned passive aggressive. Like, how about what he said was extremely passive aggressive. Said something about, like, a lot of guys. He said something about, like, it sucks making it this far and not getting the ultimate prize with all these guys who now their futures are in doubt, including mine, something like that. And it's like, whoa, like, he's still on this contract extension for a couple more years. It's just to hint at that even, suggests that he's not fully bought into the Packers organization. And so now I think we can talk about a couple of scenarios where, now I don't think the Packers are going to let him go. It'd be dumb to do so because, I think Rodgers to an extent does need that pass protection that Green Bay provides him, which is the best probably in the league. But also the other argument is it seems to be that Rodgers likes to maybe take a year, so to speak, to get into a system before thriving in it, right? So those two things combined, it doesn't make sense for Rodgers to leave. It doesn't make sense for the Packers to let him go. But if the guy's unhappy, there is a scenario out there where he is playing for another team. And if he's gone away from Green Bay, I like the Vikings' chances a heck of a lot more in the NFC North.
What if they just flipped Dak and Rodgers and just alleviated those two issues?
Would Rodgers want to go back to McCarthy?
Probably not, but I don't know.
I would hate that though. Like, it's for as much, because I'm a Rodgers fan, right? To get him away from Green Bay but only to see him go to freaking Dallas would be terrible. Don't have to bring that up. Anywhere, put him to the AFC. Give him the AFC.
Okay, so this begs ultimately the question, to draw the comparison to the Vikings. Which situation would you rather have? The rocky one with the head coach and Mike Zimmer, kind of, not on the hot seat, but near it. It's someone's turning, someone started the microwave a little early. Would you rather have that with the talent that you have, the quarterback situation that you're stuck with, and many of us are, not.
It's meh. It's meh.
Meh. Yeah, it's meh. Yeah. Would you rather have all of that heading into next year, and the opportunity, knowing what your GM has historically done, and the players you're going to get back from the COVID list theoretically, and injuries and so forth, or what the Packers have right now, which seems like a lot of internal turmoil. You've got a bad draft position now because you won. I mean, that's good for you. You won, but you do have bad draft position now. Ha. And
that's how we get back at the Packers.
Yeah. Which situation would you rather have?
I mean, I'm going to take Green Bay, and until Aaron Rodgers is off the roster, I will take Green Bay. And I'm just saying that because this is sort of like, eventually there should be a wake up call, right? Get this guy some help, get this guy what he wants, because he's a top 3 football player in the league at the most important position in the sport. Get him what he wants. And he's still on your roster. He's still under contract. They have that advantage, which is a more significant advantage than any other potential advantage the Vikings could have in that scenario. So I'm going to take the Packers situation. And that roster is still good. Like, it's still a great roster, but there are key holes that can be improved to lift them to that next level. They missed their opportunity in 2020, and they still have the chance to do so. They need to take advantage of it, or, we know about Rodgers and the passive aggressiveness. It could get more aggressive in the future.
Yeah, it's a fun situation. I still think the Packers have the better situation.
Oh yeah,
well, because they got
the Vikings were 7-9.
Right?
Wait, was it 7-9? 6? I don't even remember what the record was now.
7-9. But it is fun to monitor, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on this because
it's also just fun for us to make fun of the Packers. Like, yeah. we're making fun of the Packers despite that they went 13-3 and kicked the crap out of the rest of the NFC except for Tampa.
We have to. It's either that or go cry in a corner. I mean, what would you rather do?
Right.
I think it's an obvious decision there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that's the show. I don't think we have anything else for you.
Interesting one, fun one.
Do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to deliver about football or otherwise?
I just want to say I don't understand how coaches are so bad at fourth down decisions.
Hey, we should make our Super Bowl picks quick.
Unbelievable. I don't get it. Fourth down decisions. I don't understand.
2 of them. Yeah.
We can do Super Bowl next week. We can since we
don't
got a
need to
couple
pick
weeks.
up.
We
That's
got a
true.
couple weeks, but
Pro Bowl picks.
Sean McDermott, man, those field goals playing the Chiefs, playing the Kansas City Chiefs. Now I'm gonna kick a field goal from 20 yards. Good luck. That's waving the white flag to your entire team. Oh my god. Bad.
Yeah. And Stephon Diggs standing there, being the last person on the field, getting the
that
optics
sucks.
going. That's I feel like that was. I'm not saying that Stephon Diggs isn't the type of guy to be like that, but I think he was fully aware that someone would take a picture and put it on Twitter. That's just what I think. I think he is like that. I think he's the type of guy who would do that anyways, but I also think he knows what he was doing. He knew that it was good optics for his future. That's my final thought. Thank you guys as always for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with hopefully some more Vikings updates. Otherwise, we will manufacture some more content for you because that's what we do. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check out the Climb in the Pocket Network. I know we have a couple new shows. I think there's 2 or maybe 3 now. So check out what those guys are doing. Everyone's working hard to deliver some content in a situation where there's not much content to be found. So check that stuff out. You can also find us on YouTube if you would like to watch this program. And lastly, you can find us on Daily Norseman. Make sure to check us out as well as the rest of the writers on that website. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next week.